Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Live Show, Week 14 Rankings Edition. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great. It's a great day to get those lineups right because, people, we got one weekend between us and those fantasy. So maybe, just maybe, you already got the playoff spot and the bye week clinched. But for those of us without it, we again got to go through QB, RB, wide receiver, and tight end and get things right. Of course, we do got the expert in the house to help us do all that. Fantasy Live Director of Analytics, Dwain "The Rock" McFarland. What's up, man?
Expert. What are you talking about, Ian? We're all just guessing. No. Super excited to break down the slate and super excited for tonight, Ian. Do you have special plans?
In my articles, for the record, I do always say alleged expert, so I'm 100% with you there. But not just I'm going over to Mama Hartitz's house. Cowboys fans over here. She slowly but surely, Dwain, actually gained more confidence about this season. She said after the Micah Parsons trade, it was the first time that she could remember as a Cowboys fan that she actually did not think for 1 second that we could win a Super Bowl. Not saying she's completely turned a corner there, but vibes a little bit better here.
Yeah, the last two games have everybody excited. Here in Dallas, obviously, all the sports talk radio is Cowboys anyway, but it's a lot more positive than it was just a few weeks ago. Even though the playoff shot, is still long, but a win over the Lions would go a long way for the Cowboys.
Something about beating your rival, whether it be college football, NFL, or maybe just, at the supermarket, just seems to always be pretty nice. So with that said, guys, let's get into our show. And we remind you, for those of us joining us live, send us your start sits. We'll be trying to get to those throughout the show. So with that in mind, let's get after it with our DraftKings opening lines. It's Thursday here on the Fantasy Live Show, which means there is plenty of news coming in. That said, we'll be touching on a lot of the injury updates as we go position by position. But Dwain did want to call out probably the biggest one on today, and that is the fact that Lamar Jackson, after being limited on Wednesday, unfortunately was downgraded to a DNP on Thursday. So offensive coordinator for the Ravens, Todd Monken, did say, quote, "I would expect him to play on Sunday, but not ideal, man. I was hoping that after he played, obviously, last Thursday night, maybe having those extra few days would actually allow Lamar to get a full week of practice for the first time in basically a month. Unfortunately, that will not be the case."
Yeah, man. And across the board, I think, all of us as rankers at Fantasy Life, we've lost the confidence in Lamar because of the rushing. You and Friedman did a good job of covering this yesterday in the show as well. But basically, I'm with Friedman. Lamar's got to show me that he can be Lamar again. So right now, just because we have to suppress the rushing production so much, this is a guy that we used to project for 40, 45 yards per game. Now I'm projecting him for under 30, and I'm worried I might be over now that he's dealing with this injury during the week. I probably will go in and lower those a little bit more. Honestly, on some of the advice we give, on things like this, Ian, I'll lean towards the under, if a player's hurt. If I look at our lines and they're somehow higher than what the aggregate props are, I'll go in and deduct them just because I'm not confident in this. I don't want anyone betting a Lamar over, and I don't want anyone getting overexcited about putting Lamar in their fantasy lineup either. So might move him down a couple spots because honestly, he was in a group of guys where I was like, I can see starting Jacoby Brissett over Lamar Jackson. I might be there now.
It's a situation where he will be playing, on Sunday. It's not a night game, so we should have the status well ahead of time. But Dwain, for those people out there who have Lamar, maybe they do need to unfortunately have an emergency QB ready. God forbid it doesn't go. I think Tyrod Taylor and CJ Stroud are probably the two best bets. It sounds like Jaden Daniels, who got into full practice, will be returning because otherwise I have Marcus Mariota as my go-to streamer and, in case of emergency here. So Tyrod, CJ Stroud, those kind of top two streamers this week, again, that should be available in more leagues than not.
Yep, that's the two that I would look at. I was just looking on Yahoo right now at their rostership, and the two that stick out to me that are under 50%. Darnold's at 55%, so he might be there. But then after that, yes, it would be CJ Stroud, and then the least rostered is Tyrod Taylor, who we'll talk about more later.
Yeah. Yes, we will. One last thing I wanted to get to is actually Eagles defensive tackle Jalen Carter underwent a procedure on both of his shoulders. Tis but a flesh wound, you could say. He is considered week to week ahead of, again, the Monday night matchup against the Chargers. So definitely not going to be out there, which honestly is fantastic news for that entire Chargers offense, given the state of their line. We saw Javonte Williams and Cam Scatterby have multi-touchdown games against the Eagles without Carter in the middle. Dwain, one of the most important defenders, I would say, when trying to project rushing games. That said, did you see this and go, oh my gosh, now all of a sudden I need to add a significant portion of rushing yards to the Chargers in your projections? Or is it more so just all right, that's nice. Maybe I'll move the guys up a couple spots in the ranks?
He is a superstar. So the way we handle that, we have done some work mainly led by Matthew Friedman. He's done a great job with that, and with our data scientist, Alex. And they have come up with something where the biggest thing we care about is when there's multiple starters out. But if there is a superstar that's out, it does count a little bit more than that. And Jalen Carter certainly does fit the superstar caliber player category. And playing on the interior, it is a big advantage for interior offensive linemen facing him. So it won't be a huge boost, but we will give a slight boost on this. Like, and when I say slight boost, guys, we're like talking about 0.05 yards per carry. So it's going to it might move a player's projection by 1 or 2 yards.
Yeah. And again, it's always kind of funny hearing the actual
that was the most boring
falls off in projections. Well, no, man, that's how it goes. But I get it. You got to be conservative. Like we talked about this in the offseason, Dwayne. It's probably a good thing you and Freeman are in charge of the projections, because I'd be out there bumping up 50 yards or something crazy.
No, I was just laughing at you because you go, like 1 or 2 yards. So yeah, we're really not changing it that much. But the Eagles can't afford to have any other injuries. The one thing it did make me think of the most, Ian, because you and I have been having conversations about the defenses we want to carry on some of these playoff teams and some of these larger field contests. We do have the Eagles as our second defense on some of these teams. And now I'm kind of like, not so excited about that because the schedule is pretty tough.
Not loving that. Still loving Tampa Bay, but yeah, Eagles having a little bit of a fall off. We'll see if they can stay the ship as we get through the final weeks of the season. But enough of that, guys. Let's get to our running back preview. This has been our DraftKings opening lines. But first, a quick word to our friends at DraftKings. I teamed up with DraftKings Sportsbook to bring you the best way to get in on the action this NBA season. Right now, new customers who bet just $5 will get $200 in bonus bets if your bet wins. That's right, new customers bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if your bet wins. All you have to do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using the promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. Use your bonus bets on same-game parlays, player props, moneyline spreads, and more, or stay on the action with live betting that brings every play to life. So here's your play. New customers turn $5 into $200 if your bet wins. Paid in bonus bets, the crown is yours. Thanks to DraftKings Sportsbook for sponsoring this. Make this NBA season one to remember. Note that minimum minus 500 odds are required. We got the Fantasy Life consensus RB rankings on the screen. Jahmyr Gibbs ready to go off against the Cowboys on Thursday Night Football. Gets the RB1 spot, followed by Jonathan Taylor, James Cook, Devon Achane, Bijan Robinson, and Josh Jacobs. RB7 through 12, we got Bucky Irving, Kyren Williams, Chase Brown, Derrick Henry, Javonte Williams, and Saquon Barkley, hopefully on his way back to redemption. We'll see what happens there. Transitioning to the RB2 tier of things, we got Breece Hall sitting pretty as the RB13, followed by Quinshon Judkins, Travis Etienne, RJ Harvey, Ashton Genty, a hopefully returning Omarion Hampton coming in as RB18. RBs 19 through 24, Jalen Warren, Kenneth Walker, DeAndre Swift, Woody Marks, Bam Knight, and Kareem Hunt. Dwayne, if we had to do our best, meet the parents' impression and kind of draw a circle of trust here, personally, I probably have it right around RJ Harvey and Ashton Genty in that RB16, 17 range. What say you?
Yeah, I agree. Those are the players that we know are they're in a role. I mean, you could argue on Travis Etienne, like he moves around a little bit. Like sometimes he's closer to like 50% of the work. Sometimes he's closer to 60. But once you get to Hampton returning from an injury, we don't know what the split will look like between him and Kamani Vidal, who apparently Kamani Vidal warms the cockles. I don't know what cockles are, but of Jim Harbaugh, they warm the cockles of his heart. So I don't know if that's like the valves in your heart. Hopefully they're all working really well. Jalen Warren, a little bit more flip-flopping the last 3 to 4 games. Now some of that's been injury-induced between him and Kenneth Gainwell, so we don't have a super clean trend there. Kenneth Walker, we've talked about it all year. DeAndre Swift now in a split backfield. Woody Marks gets the work, but the offensive line is terrible. He hasn't looked good. So yeah, I think you're drawing the line of trust or the circle of trust in the right spot.
And that was where we kind of saw things lying with the projected fantasy points as well, which you can find for yourself over at fantasylife.com. Quickly on injuries, guys, we are expecting to follow running backs to play. Keep in mind that we'll get the final designations on Friday or Saturday for the Monday night game. But yeah, Omarion Hampton, again, got word that he is expecting to be out there and make his long anticipated return. Here we go, Mr. Ride or Die. Also got Woody Marks returning to a limited practice on Thursday. Aaron Jones has been practicing in a limited fashion all week. Kyle Monungai did not practice Wednesday, but did return on Thursday. play, putting him on track to suit up. And also note that Emari Demercado is back in action and back at practice as well. Unfortunately, Dwain, no Alvin Kamara still, which means Devin Neal will be on that RB2 borderline. And we also have Trey Benson continuing to, unfortunately, not get on the practice field. It is a point now, Dwain, where we've had that 21-day window opened up, and I'm starting to get a little bit concerned about if Benson even is going to return this year.
Yeah, I think we actually have a decision on one of our teams. Not that people care about our teams, but they're facing the same decisions, right? And it's that, is Trey Benson going to make it back? They have until next week to activate him. So if they don't activate him next week, guys, he's done for the season. So it really depends on who's available on your waiver wire. But a lot of times guys like Samaje Perine, stuff like that, where someone, if in a pinch, like you had to put him in your lineup in the playoffs, you could. Plus, if something, knock on wood, we don't want this, but it happened to Chase Brown, I think we would all feel pretty good about Samaje Perine. Probably comes down to your depth if you're needing upside, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's trending in the wrong direction big time right here for Trey Benson. And with the Cardinals, like, they're out of it, man. Like, they're not vying for a playoff spot. So why try to push this guy back if you don't need to? I'm with you. I'm more on the skeptical side right now that Trey Benson plays this season.
Tough matchups coming for the Cardinals as well. Rams this week, Texans the next. So Bam Knight, again, is profiling as a lead back, and accordingly, he is at the top of our ranks from that backfield. Still not exactly someone who needs to be forced in the lineup, so by any stretch of the imagination. So let's get to our riser of the week, someone who was formerly banged up for a long period of time, not anymore. Bucky Irving back in the picture and back in the saddle as the Buccaneers RB1. I just love this, Dwayne. We have seen him get 18-plus touches in every single game this year. Last year, it took until week 12 for the first time for Bucky to even get that many touches. So great player, great workload, even a reasonable enough great matchup against the Saints. What's not to love here?
Yeah, I love it. He's back to mid-range running back mid-range running back 1 territory. Ian, I think most of us have him somewhere between 6 and 7 in the ranks. I think that's good. If you look at Bucky last week, 79% of the rushing attempts. That's the big thing. Now, his workload in the passing game did come down a little bit versus what we saw earlier in the year, so that could hurt him a little bit. But if we go back and look at last season, whenever he went off in the fantasy playoffs, it was essentially this role that we just saw in the last game, and they were letting Rachaad White get more of that passing down work. So last year, even though he didn't get over that 45% route participation over the final 4 weeks of the year, that does include the wild card loss, guys, but like, it helps us enlarge our sample some. He averaged 18.5 fantasy points despite not being the leader in route participation for the backfield. So I like him, as a mid-range running back 1 anyway. But if they do decide to start ramping back up that passing game work as well, Ian, which is possible, moving into the second and third game back, then we're going to like Bucky even more. That's going to give him running back 1 overall upside the rest of the way. Either way, though, somebody that you're super excited to have back in your lineups.
And he's honestly made the most out of his opportunities before and after the injury. Number 1 this season in tackles avoided per touch. So good seeing Bucky. Last week he was already reversing field and stuff again as well. Again, Dwayne's RB7, my RB8. We are feeling very confident about him getting back to booming in the box score. Some other guys who want to quickly go over, Dwayne, starting off with James Cook. Flow chart matchup here going up against the Bengals. And guys, this is also the one matchup of the week where we deem to be at least a little bit concerned about the impacts of Mother Nature. Sounds like this is going to be a snow game potentially in the 20s. So if there wasn't even enough reason to already love James Cook in this one, Dwayne, sure seems like he could be getting as many touches as he can handle.
Yeah, I did move the passing rates down for both of these teams due to the weather today and in the projection model. Guys, you can see that all over at fantasylife.com. Just click on projections. But James Cook, man, he's leading the NFL right now, 19.2 carries per game. He's not as involved in the passing game as like some of us want, and we all know that he could be really good in that capacity, but it is what it is. They're using Ty Johnson there, but you get the nice matchup this weekend. He's handled 72% of the team's carries on the season. Bills are 6-point favorites against the Bengals, who have written a blank check, Ian, to opposing running back rooms. They are the number 1 fantasy boost to opposing backfields at 7.9 additional points per game. So it's an absolute smash spot. You guys are starting James Cook no matter what, but obviously this is a really big game where he could be the running back 1 overall. He has an Xfinity best ceiling, Ian, of 30.9 points. That's a lot of fantasy points, guys.
Exactly. And I know he hasn't gotten as much, receiving stuff as we necessarily wanted, but it is more. I mean, over the first, first 8 games of the year, he only had 13 receptions. Last 5 games, though, he's all the way up there at 14. So again, can't really find any wide receivers they like. Why not throw the ball to James Cook and hopefully a returning Dalton Kincaid? More on him a little bit later. Dwayne, another running back who, again, is rock solid in our starting lineups, but still maybe we should be expecting extra fireworks. And that is Josh Jacobs at home against a Bears defense that, I think has exceeded expectations this year. They forced a lot of turnovers and everything like that, and they're getting healthier now in the secondary. That said, man, only the Giants have actually allowed more rushing yards before contact to opposing RBs. So, yeah, wheels up for Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, great matchup. He's the running back 8 already on the season with 17.1 fantasy points. Ian, they're 6.5-point favorites over the first place Bears. People not believing in the Bears right now. Sorry, swing. 27.6 is their team total in Matthew Friedman's NFL betting game model. If you guys haven't checked that out, you should. That's the third highest team total that Friedman has on the slate. And if you look at the matchups historically, where you get a big spread and you have a high team total, which they go hand in hand, guys, you use the spread to get to the team total. But whenever you've got a nice game total plus the spread, those are really good spots, especially for running back ones. So Josh Jacobs projects for 18.4 fantasy points. Ian, he has a 28 Xfinity best mark. That's also really juicy. Not quite James Cook territory, but right there, top 6 running back.
28 touchdowns in 29 games with the Packers. Pretty safe bet for you anytime touchdown bettors out there. Just remember, guys, I am not a good gambler, so keep that in mind, though. Broncos running back RJ Harvey facing off against the Raiders, Dwain. And on the one hand, we can look at RJ Harvey and say, no, he hasn't been efficient with his opportunities. And even just, again, trying to go back and watch some of those reads, if you will, against the Commanders in the last game was not pretty. On the other hand, he's been getting a lot of opportunities in the absence of J.K. Dobbins. And we did have Sean Payton come out and say, you haven't seen anything yet regarding Harvey. So it's not exactly a smash matchup here against the Raiders when it comes to, what they've been allowing to opposing running backs. In reality, only Jonathan Taylor and Kamani Vidal have broke 17 fantasy points against, this group this year. But that said, Dwain, I think, enthusiasm, if you will, might be starting to lack a little bit with the Raiders, not so much for the Broncos right now.
Exactly. I mean, and here's the big thing is what you mentioned, like the volume is 62% of the attempts in these 2 games without J.K. Dobbins. We also know how fluky efficiency can be. So RJ Harvey could get things going really quickly in that capacity. And if he did, he would be more of a running back 1, guys. Right now, we're really grading him towards, probably closer to his floor. I don't want to say completely closer to his floor because we've got him as a mid-range running back 2. I think his floor is like a low-end running back 2. But if he gets the efficiency going, there is enough volume there for this guy to be more like a running back 1. If you look at the Raiders, to your point, really more of a neutral matchup, but the Broncos 7.5-point favorites. They've got a healthy 24-point team total, just like we just talked about with Jacobs and James Cook. When you get those 2 things and you historically put them together for the lead ball carrier, it's led to good things in fantasy football more often than not. So not as high as the other 2 guys we just talked about, but a 22.2 Xfinity best ceiling projection, and he projects for 13.6 as his median. So yeah, mid-range running back 2 this week for Mr. RJ Harvey. But there's definitely upside there, guys.
Dwayne's RB15, my RB17. And again, we're just really one really good game away, guys, I would say, from potentially flirting with RB1 status the rest of the way. Also, Jaguars RB Travis Etienne. Dwayne, no, he hasn't been getting a ton of goal line opportunities recently, but still been doing pretty darn good this year as a whole, guys. RB18 in PPR points per game. And ever since they came back from their week 8 bye, he actually had 4 straight top 13 finishes before last week's dud. So I know fantasy is a bit of a what have you done for me lately sport. I still remember last year, man, where Terry McLaurin has an incredible season, and then the entire offseason is just, oh yeah, but what do you do for me in the actual fantasy championship? So I know, we need to see bigger performances from ETN when it matters, but maybe we get one here this Sunday against the Colts.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, the last 3 games before last week, so the previous 3, 15.7, 19.3, and 20.6 fantasy points. But to your point, what people remember the 5.1 from last week, even though he still led the team in attempts at 55%. I will say there's a little bit of risk with his workload each week. We do see it fluctuate a little bit, and that's what I mentioned earlier with the circle of trust. But it's not like his stuff drops down to 40 or 30%, right? And you have a game where Tootin just takes over. It's just like a difference of 5 to 10 percentage points in the opportunities that he gets. So there's a little bit of variance here, but still you've got the Colts defense, Ian, and oh my goodness, over the last 4 outings, the Colts have given up a 6.5 fantasy point boost to opposing rushing attacks. That is the second most over that span. So they're a team that's been hurting here a little bit recently on the defensive side of the ball. So ETN, mid-range running back 2, 21.3 Xfinity best projection, just under what we talked about with RJ Harvey.
Dwayne's RB17, my RB14, certainly a believer in what ETN can do in this spot. Dwayne, let's get to the sicko start of the week now. Again, you try to comb through the trash here and find some guys that nobody's going to feel great about starting, but sometimes, beggars can't be choosers, particularly when we do have 4 teams on bye. So I believe you actually went 4 for 4 on these last week. So no pressure, Dwayne. Who you got for running back here in week 14?
Yeah, it was the first 4 for 4 of the season, so I'm not going to toot my horn on that. It was probably just got lucky, and eventually, Ian, you're going to run to a 4 for 4 week. We've had some 3 for 4s, but a lot of 50-50 weeks. But to your point, like the rules that we impose, you can't be on more than 50% of the rosters and running backs. That's the toughest position to do for the sicko starts because any projectable volume backs, they're going to be on rosters. That's just the way it is in fantasy. Everybody's stocking these guys, even if they're just sitting on their bench all season long. But Corum, you talk about him regularly each week in your rankings column and in the work you do or in the 10 things to know. And Blake Corum is one of the best handcuffs. So only taken in 20, or he's available in 75% of the leagues, Ian. He's only in 5% of starting lineups. But Kyron Williams, he's dealing with the ankle injury. We do expect him to play. Sean McVay has been very positive, about Kyron. He came back into the game last week. So we think he's probably playing. But if he's dealing with an injury that opens things up to potentially re-aggravate something during the game, that could be an issue. But the big thing for Corum is excluding all that, getting rid of that from, Kyron Williams. If you look at him, he's averaged 10 rushing attempts per game since week 7. So he actually has projectable volume, and we've got a really good situation here where the Rams are 8.5-point favorites. They've got the number 2 team total on the slate at 28.5. And if something did happen with Kyron, this would obviously be the waiver wire cover player of the week would be Blake Corum. So, and it actually doesn't project bad, man. 6.8 at a median. I know you guys like, oh man, that's gross. But his Xfinity best ceiling is 12.3. Essentially, does he score a touchdown or not? That's the difference between his median projection and his ceiling projection. So I love playing guys like Corum in game scripts like this, and you get the added benefit that if somehow, again, we never want these things to happen. If Kyron were to miss time, I do believe you would be plugging Blake Corum straight into a role that we think was equal, honestly, potentially more than Kyron. Because we don't know that Blake Corum would have to share volume with Jarquez Hunter, the rookie, who just hasn't even been able to be active most games this year. So there's a chance you would see like an 80% snap share going to Blake Corum. We've certainly seen Sean McVay willing to do that in the past, Ian. We've seen him do it with Darrell Henderson. We've seen him do it with Kyron Williams. We saw him do it. Todd Gurley, why wouldn't you give a guy an 80% snap share when their name's Todd Gurley? But he's done this with lesser backs as well. We've even had stints where Cam Akers was getting 75% snap shares.
Hey, pre-Achilles Cam Akers, Dwayne, was special, okay? No slander for Akers here. But no,
Sweet
CJ
visor.
Anderson, a bunch of guys. Oh, 100%, man. That's what really matters at the end of the day. But no, I couldn't agree more. Again, guys, Corum, Brian Robinson, Bashal Tootin, and Tyler Algier. If I did have my pick of, all the handcuffs in the league, those probably would be the top 4. I would be trying to stash 4 down the stretch. Now, for our Hartitz heater, guys, give me DeAndre Swift going off in Lambeau, 130 yards, not 1, but 2 trips to the end zone for a Bears offense that is playing well, but more so on the run game as opposed to passing. Again, crazy stat from yesterday was how Caleb Williams is tracking to become the first quarterback and last in completion percentage to still lead his team to the number 1 seed. So guess what? Bears fans shouldn't care because you guys are winning a lot of football games, but this has become more of a run-first team. And with Kyle Monangai being a little bit banged up, maybe we do see Swift, again, just find a way to make the most out of his opportunities, which really he's been able to do far more weeks than not. Even with Kyle Monangai becoming more involved here in recent weeks, guys, we're talking about Swift having a top 16 finish in 5 of his last 7 games since returning from that bye week. So whether you want to say it's DeAndre Swift being good, whether you want to give all the credit to Ben Johnson or the offensive line, it doesn't matter. We're getting the production from Swift, and I think he's due now for a big run or two, and hence that's why he is my Hartitz heater for the week. So my RB20, Dwayne's RB24, again, should be in far more lineups, not against the Packers defense that is really good, don't get me wrong, but we have seen Rico Dowdle, even the Giants a little bit, be able to lean on this group and still their will. So keep an eye on that, and keep an eye on Xfinity Start Sit, baby. It's time to get to your questions. Let's get after it. already got some questions in the chat, Dwayne. We're going to get to them right now. In large part, thanks to our Xfinity Start Sit tool, which, hey, if we can't get to yours, feel free to go check it out for free over at fantasylife.com. But first things first, Dwayne, from a regular, a.k.a. AJ Hawk's Toxic Finger, in full PPR, we got Isaac Tesla, Kimani Vidal, or Chris Rodriguez. With no Amon-Ra, he is leaning towards Isaac Tesla. And honestly, I think he's on the right track.
Yeah, if we knew more about Omari and Hampton's status, we would lean to Kimani Vidal easily here. But we don't know that, and it sounds like we have a good chance for Omari and Hampton to play. So with the information that you have, yes, the Xfinity start-sit tool also agrees, looking at PPR. Xfinity best ceiling of 15.2 points for Tesla, 11.7 for Chris Rodriguez, and 8.8 right now for Kimani Vidal, projecting a split workload between him and Omari and Hampton.
I tried, guys, to get word on Amon-Ra because Schefter sent like a complete nothing burger tweet. And I literally said, so is he in or out? And he replied to me that the team does not know yet, Dwayne. So gotten to the point now where I say something quirky that people actually reply to me, and I just kind of feel bad about it. But doesn't sound like he's going to play. I think they elevated another wide receiver. So again, keep an eye on what goes down. But yes, Isaac Tesla, who we'll talk about more in just a little bit, is firmly in that wide receiver 3 conversation. Looking at Kevin's 9-7. This is for a lot. Okay, underdog and projections on Sleeper, Isaac Tesla again, or Travis Etienne in PPR. I'm just cool with Travis Etienne in that scenario.
Yep, Etienne for me as well.
From Beyonce Ramen, full PPR, needs help with the flex spot. Chris Olave, Quinshon Judkins, or Terry McLaurin. Chris Olave did get back to practice on Thursday, so we're feeling better there. It's just tough, Dwayne. I want to say Olave, but at the same time, when I have these toss-ups and I see a running back that's probably going to get 20-plus touches, I usually lean that way. So it's close, but I lean Judkins. What say you?
I'm going Olave, but it's really close. If you look at their median projection, 14.9 for Olave and a PPR, 13.8 for Judkins. The ceiling is 21.9 for Olave, 21 for Judkins. So it really comes down to your preference. I do have Olave ranked ahead in the flex ranks over Judkins, so I'll say Olave, but close call.
Last one for now from our guy Simon Valerio, full PPR, needs 2 RBs and a flex. We got Kenneth Walker, Jalen Warren, Omari and Hampton, or Michael Pittman. So let's see, the 2 RBs. I would say,
it's Walker, Hampton, who else?
Walker, Hampton, Jalen Warren, and Michael Pittman. I think I just roll with all 3 RBs and probably sit Michael Pittman out.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. So across those, and this sounds weird, but Kenneth Walker's projected for the most points at 12. Now we're not getting crazy with it, but Pittman's right there at 11.9. Okay. And then we've got Hampton below that at 10.7. And then we've got Jalen Warren below that at 10.5. If you're looking at the ceilings, they pretty much go in that order, slightly higher ceiling for Warren than Hampton. But Pittman is also second in ceiling. So I'm actually thinking it's Walker, Pittman, and Hampton, Ian, or you could flip-flop Hampton and Warren. Like I think that's the choice, is if you're going with Hampton or Warren. The model says Walker, Pittman, Hampton, but they're very close guys. These guys are all grouped together in our ranks if you look at it as well.
Warren's playing great, man, but that Ravens defense, again, literally went from being last in EPA allowed per rush now to first, so the schedule does change things. I get it, but the Steelers also aren't exactly playing their best football, with Aaron Rodgers very much looking his age as of late. So appreciate you guys sending along those questions. We'll get to more of the wide receiver and quarterback related ones as we go through those sections. First, a quick word to our friends over at Xfinity. Guys, if you call yourself a sports fan, you got to have Xfinity. All the games all in one place, so you, a scholar, can become the best at watching sports. We got the Sports Zone, which features every pro football game and over 1,000 college games, highlights and alerts all in one place. And oh, by the way, you can watch those on the multi-view setting, which is, in my opinion, one of the greatest inventions of the 21st century, allowing you to be in up to 4 stadiums at once. There's also the Xfinity Fan View, which features live scores, odds, and stats all in one place, all personalized to you. And did I mention that you can catch all this in Xfinity Enhanced 4K, a simply stunning viewing experience. To check out all this, guys, all you have to do is use your voice remote and just say football to find it all. So again, thank you to our friends over at Xfinity. Imagine all your football all in one place. Easy. Xfinity, imagine that. You can learn more at Xfinity.com. Note that restrictions do apply. New residential customers only. Taxes and fees are extra and subject to change. Breaking down the Week 14 ranks here on the Fantasy Life Show. Moving on to some wide receivers. Got our top 12 on the screen right meow, led off by Mr. Jackson Smith-Njigba, Jamar Chase, Rashee Rice, Puka Nacua, and a pair of Cowboys and George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb rounding out our top 6. Wide receivers 7 through 12, Devontae Adams, Jameson Williams, Nico Collins, Chris Olave, A.J. Brown, and yes, Jalen Waddle, despite the back-to-back duds, coming in as our wide receiver 12 ahead of what should be a nice little spot against the New York Jets. As we move on to our wide receiver 2 tier, we have T. Higgins tentatively expected to play. He did get a full practice in here on Thursday, followed by Emeka Ibuka, Ladd McConkey, Michael Wilson, assuming Marvin Harrison Jr. is out of the picture. Please, for the love of God, do something. Justin Jefferson, he's our wide receiver 17, followed by Devontae Smith, Cortland Sutton, Terry McLaurin, Christian Watson, Zay Flowers, Michael Pittman, and Alec Pierce. Dwayne, again, under our circle of trust idea, I cannot believe I'm saying this, but I think we probably have to cut it off right in front of Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are issues for all the players that are in tier 2, or on the second page here, 13 to 24. But if I'm looking at the right side of the screen where we get into that, Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, names like that, I do think it's either at Ladd McConkey or Michael Wilson where we draw the line. Obviously, Michael Wilson's very dependent. We'll talk about it in a second on what happens with Marvin Harrison Jr., who didn't practice yesterday, still waiting on the update for today.
As we get through that, guys, let's go over some of the key injuries here. Mentioned before, T. Higgins is tentatively now expected to play after going from a limited session on Wednesday to a full session on Thursday. So wheels up there for someone who is absolutely balling before, unfortunately, getting that injury. We'll find out hopefully what happens by the end of the show with Amon-Ra St. Brown. But again, probably not expecting him to be out there, hence why he wasn't in our top 12 to begin with. Also note Devontae Adams missed practice on Wednesday with a hamstring injury. I'm not exactly sure how serious it is. Hopefully just more maintenance than anything. But yes, obviously something to keep an eye on. Also note that Drake London, seemingly on the wrong side of questionable, has not practiced this week with a knee injury. Gives Darnell Mooney a decent little boost. And also Kyle Pitts is someone who, again, is quickly rising up the ranks, has actually had some nice performances with Kirk Cousins in particular. Marvin Harrison Jr. and our one true short king, Greg Dortch, unfortunately not practicing. More and more targets on the way from Michael Wilson and Trey McBride, of course. Sounds good, though, for Chris Olave. Again, he got back to a limited session on Thursday, dealing with that back injury. Not so good, though, Dwayne, for Rome Odunze. Has not practiced yet this week as he deals with this foot issue. So if we did happen to see no Rome out there, how high would be too high to rank guys like DJ Moore and Luther Burden?
Yeah, I think Moore is the guy that we know is playing the fuller complement of snaps, but it's going to help, all of those guys. So Burden would move up and Colson Loveland would move up as well. I don't know how much they'll play Burden on the outside, if they'll do something with a different player there, because they could let Olamide Zaccheaus play in the slot if they wanted to play Burden outside, or maybe they let Olamide Zaccheaus play on the outside. But yes, it would be a bump up for all those players. I'll say the guy that's done the best as far as the underlying data goes is Burden. Like if we look at his yards per route run, targets per route run, and yes, guys, he does get some of the gimmicky screens and stuff, but DJ Moore, he gets some of the carries out of the backfield too. So they both kind of have some of these built-in touches that are there. But if you add on additional volume on top of that for both of them, I think those are the two biggest guys we're moving up. And then obviously Colson Loveland playing really, really well over the last 3 weeks. Another game where we're not going to have the precipitation issues, but it's going to be really cold. We're going to have a little bit of wind. So I did adjust down the passing numbers for both of those offenses based on the weather news that we have so far.
As always, guys, real good weather resource is courtesy of Kevin Roth over at RotoGrinders. If you go to rotogrinders.com/weather/NFL, again, just does a good job of spelling out the concerns and putting it into English for us fantasy footballers of the world. Also, a note, the Packers could get Jaden Reed and or Matthew Golden back. They've both been limited throughout the week. Again, wouldn't really be changing our projections that much for Christian Watson or Romeo Doubs. Would more so be Dontavian Wicks being the odd man out. But hey, man, with Toyotathon, Jordan Love doing his thing, who's to say they all can't eat there as this Packers passing game continues to look pretty good as the season gets colder. Also know with the Buccaneers, Mike Evans with the collarbone has been practicing in a limited fashion. Jalen McMillan as well, coming back from that neck injury. So I don't know, Dwayne. I tend to think Evans would probably be a more likely week 15 returnee. I will say, though, coming back from the collarbone, like for me, I'm not as concerned if and when Evans is back about his workload from day one. Someone like Chris Godwin, someone coming back from a lower body hamstring sort of injury, that's where I get more concerned about limited snaps. Coming back from the collarbone, like I feel like we get full time role of Mike Evans whenever he is healthy enough to return.
Yeah, all I can tell you is in my freshman year, Ian, I broke my collarbone in a preseason game for football. And once it was healed and the doctor said it was healed, like I was back out there. which was on the bench
Okay.
anyway. It wasn't a starter. So I can't really speak to what's going to happen for Mike Evans. But no, with Evans, I'm totally with you. Essentially, like once the bone's healed, it's healed. And if they don't think the bone's fully healed, they're not going to put the player back out there. So as long as the conditioning is there, and to your point, it wasn't a lower body injury. So the treadmill should have had Mike Evans on it a lot. Like he should have been fine as far as keeping the cardio in a good place. If we see him, I'm going to project him close to his normal role. The challenge is like, early in the season, it wasn't good for Mike Evans, but we know he's a really good player. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. The connection early on between him and Baker was, it was not ideal, but we know this is a connection that's been there in the past, and I think we'll lean more into that than the small sample we have for this year with Mike Evans and Baker.
God, it would be amazing if we see Evans average, the 216 yards, wherever he needs over the final 4 games to get back to 1,000. It won't happen, guys, but you can imagine what it'd be like if it did. On to our risers of the week. We got some Jets wide receivers we're talking about. Horrific start, Dwayne, to actually have any level of confidence in this Jets passing offense. But with that said, Tyrod Taylor has provided a little bit more of a floor, a.k.a. we can feel more confident in not having like 45 total passing yards out there. And with Garrett Wilson out of the picture, things have really been condensed around 80 Mitchell and John Mechie. So we have Mechie as my wide receiver 45, your wide receiver 39, Mitchell as my wide receiver 27, and your wide receiver 24. So again, not saying these guys need to be in fantasy lineups, but I know we're in some leagues, man, where we got some buys going on. And honestly, if you do have to rely on these guys, I do think there's an upside case and a winnable matchup against the Dolphins.
Yeah, look, 92% route participation rate over the last 2 games. That first game where he didn't really know the playbook, he was limited. So just looking at these last 2, man, he's got a 32% target share over those 2 games and 174 air yards per game. Now, we know with a guy like Mitchell, we can get these air yard games where we don't get the catches. But we talked about it on the utilization show this week, getting more of those intermediate looks. And that really does help from a standpoint of what we can feel more confident about from projecting. We hope that the big play down the field hits, but when you're getting a more steady diet of some of the intermediate stuff, that really does help out. And we feel more confident in him from a projection standpoint. So when we look at it, his utilization score comparisons, Ian, based on, his 5 full games that he's played over his career, 11.3 points. So it's not like something we go crazy about, but we saw the upside of what this can look like. He's averaged 15.2 fantasy points in these 2 games as the starter for the Jets. So 10.4 projection for him with an Xfinity ceiling best of 16.7. And remember, guys, that's the reasonable ceiling. The outlier ceiling for a player, when I look at that in the model for Adonai Mitchell, is 24 fantasy points. So that's whenever he hits more like that top 5% outcome in the range of outcomes. And we really just saw that. So we know that we know that it's there for Mitchell. So yeah, I do think looking at him as a low end wide receiver 3 with upside is the right way to think about Mitchell. We talk about Mechie. Hasn't had the air yards, but definitely getting the targets, man. He's getting targeted just as much as we have with Adonai Mitchell. And the lower target depth means you're more likely to get the catches. You're more likely to get the completion. So the floor is actually a little bit better on Mechie. Ceiling not quite as high as what we have with Adonai Mitchell. But when you look at Mechie, I think he's easily in that wide receiver 4 conversation or low end wide receiver 3.
By the way, Joey MYC99 wondering 80 Mitchell or Isaac Tesla if St. Brown is ruled out. We are comfortably going with 80 Mitchell over him. Yep. And again, that is reflected in those ranks that you can find over at fantasylife.com. So again, we'll keep an eye on that status. But Dwayne, a couple other situations we want to get through. Starting off with another passing game that isn't exactly crushing it, but when it is condensed enough, that doesn't always matter, guys. So with the New Orleans Fighting Cooter Doodles, we got Chris Olave obviously in wide receiver 1 status in the top 12, but perhaps when we have another emerging wide receiver in the name of Devon Bailey.
Yeah, I wanted to say, like, with real quick with Mitchell, I have him at wide receiver 24, so I'm higher than where Ian's at. So I have him as a borderline wide receiver 2. Ian's got him as a low end wide receiver 3. But when we look at Vele, since the departure of Rashid Shaheed, he stepped into this full time role. He's got a 91% route participation rate since we had the departure of Shaheed. So up until week 13, Ian, we haven't really seen anything from Vele. He had some small flashes last year in Denver, nothing of the caliber that we saw last week. But he did show signs, 26% target share last week, 40% of the air yards, and he had 33% of the end zone targets. And this is a big guy. So this is someone that we can expect to get some of the looks down inside the 5 or inside the 10 once you're in that green zone. I think the biggest development for me last week, and it probably was for you too, knowing how much you harp on this, but not using Taysom Hill all the time. once they got down inside the 10-yard line, actually letting Tyler Shuck play, see what this guy's got. I think that's the better move for you, Saints. You're trying to evaluate what you're going to do in this draft coming up. And with Vele, his utilization score is a 60 over these 3 games. So it's a small sample, but his historical comps, they've averaged 11.3 fantasy points. And if you go back and look historically, that's going to make you a wide receiver 3 a lot of years. If not, it's going to make you a high-end wide receiver 4. So he projects for 13.5 fantasy points as far as the Xfinity best. So yeah, I am looking at him as being a wide receiver 4 option for week 14.
And this is one of those matchups, too, against the Buccaneers. Well, I don't want to call it a smash spot because the Buccaneers are a good real-life defense, but they're almost so good at the line of scrimmage with Vita Vea that they almost compel teams to throw the football a little bit more often, something that we've actually seen happen to the Cowboys a bit more. 7 with Quinnen Williams, amongst others. Dwayne, also want to talk about Jaguars wide receiver 1, I guess we can say at this point, Jacoby Myers going up against the Colts. I'm not sure if Parker Washington is going to be out of the picture. He actually did return to a limited practice on Thursday, but either way, Myers would be our highest projected option against the Colts defense that hasn't exactly been locked down against wide receivers and will be without number 1 corner Sauce Gardner for at least the next several weeks.
Yeah, man, in 3 games in a full-time role, I mean, Jacoby Myers quickly acclimating to the Jaguars offense. He's averaged 15.9 fantasy points, Ian, over that span. He's got a 25% target share, more of the low ADOT variety. This is not a guy that's out here stretching out the field like an Adonai Mitchell, but 56.7 air yards per game. His historical utilization score comparisons, they average 14 points. So, I mean, we're looking at a guy that really is, one of these guys that you're going to have in that either low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 part of the conversation. He's got an Xfinity best ceiling of 17.5 fantasy points this weekend. If you look at his outlier ceiling, it's closer to 22 fantasy points. So yeah, really do like Jacoby Myers, probably in more starting lineups than not.
And finally, wanted to hype up Broncos wide receiver Pat Bryant actually coming down to the show. It was a situation where he actually did see a nice little post by bump, season high route rate, while Troy Franklin actually his lowest mark since week 1. So I don't think we're completely counting out Franklin yet, Dwayne, but it does seem like there's a potential changing of the guard going down.
Yeah, and I think the positive thing for Pat Bryant is it's been a steady climb over the course of the year, right? It'll climb and then it kind of plateaus, but he's consistently moved his route participation up over like 4-week spans. And then coming out of the bye week where we do see some of these things happen, he did take over as the wide receiver 2 behind Cortland Sutton from a route participation standpoint. To your point, it's only one data point. We can't necessarily count on it, but knowing that he's continued to increase his role and that it did happen coming out of the bye, I think there really is a chance that he sticks. He was a candidate for the sicko start of the week. We've got another one that we're going to talk about, but he is a wide receiver 5 option against the Raiders this weekend, Mr. Pat Bryant.
Speaking of that sicko start, let's get after it, guys. It's time to go hard or go home. Are you going to go hard in your leagues and start these guys, or will you go home? This is Go Hard or Go Home, fueled by the bold flavors of Mike's Hard Lemonade, the official drink of those who go hard for their league. Again, Dwayne, it's the man on everyone's mind, and you seem to be pretty hyped about it. Talk about Lions wide receiver 2, let's face it, Isaac Tesla, and what maybe he could do on Thursday night.
Yeah, J-Mo's going to smash if we don't have Amon-Ra. But yes, Tesla is the next guy in line. Tom Kennedy's going to play the slot, but Tesla is the guy that can get down the field, Ian. He can give you the big plays. He's also the guy that the Lions swapped 2025 third-rounders with the Jaguars and then tacked on 2 more third-rounders in 2026 to make sure that they got onto their roster. So they clearly saw something they liked with this guy. I know early in the year, we basically just said, hey, Isaac Tesla, barely out there, but he's going to score. He's going to have a chance to score a touchdown every week. That kind of went away for a bit, but at least he's a guy that we've shown can be active once you get down in the red zone. That gives you a chance to score these touchdowns. We don't have Sam Laporta, probably not going to have Amon-Ra St. Brown. Khalif Raymond also not going to play in this game. Heck, Brock Wright probably not even going to be on the field for this game. So a lot of opportunity here. Tesla only has a 6% targets per route run on the season, guys. Honestly, that's absolutely terrible, but he does happen to play in one of these offenses, Ian, where I think it can be misleading because there's so many other good weapons. Once you factor in Jahmyr Gibbs, all the other players we just named. And we do have a recent player that kind of gave us an example of that, and that was Juwan Jennings, who had been buried with the 49ers forever, didn't really have great targets per route run over the course of his career, but when you think about it, when you get out there, there's still a Brandon Ayuk or there's still a Deebo Samuel, there's a George Kittle, there's some combination of those guys and a CMC. You can see why a player like Juwan Jennings was able to kind of, flower and grow into something greater, even though we hadn't seen those great underlying career data points. So I think that's something here with Tesla that we just have to acknowledge, that even though you got on the field, man, there's so many other good targets. It's not surprising that you didn't get a lot of opportunities. So the big thing, though, is 94% route participation in that Thanksgiving game. So that's a full-time role, Ian, in the Lions offense, where odds makers don't seem to care. The Lions offensive, their projection for the week is 28.3 points. That is the third highest team total. And that's with all these injuries. So the odds makers are not worried about it. Friedman is a little more worried about it than them, but even in his model, he's not deducting a huge amount of points here for the Lions. So yeah, Tesla has a ceiling Xfinity best of 15.1, median projection of 9.2. I think he's a borderline wide receiver 3. And I wrote this in the article because I'm a coward. But I have him at wide receiver 40, but the projections have him as a wide receiver 3.
I have him wide receiver 35. And again, the target, per route run mark is fair to be concerned about. But as we did see with Juwan Jennings, Dwayne, sometimes we do see those roses grow from concrete regardless. And it does seem like Tesla has a chance to be just that. Guys, for my Hartitz heater, I am so ready to get hurt again, but dang it, this is the week that Justin Jefferson finally starts to look like Justin Jefferson again. Torches the Washington Commanders for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. I know. JJ McCarthy is throwing the football. And that's not ideal, but literally every other thing is going our way. That's why it's a little bit of a bold call for sure. Not as sick as Dwayne, so obviously he is the king there. But I just think, guys, when you look at it, Washington, dead last in the EPA per dropback. They've had 2 starting cornerbacks in Trey Amos and Marshawn Lattimore out for pretty much the entire month of November. It's a situation where they should be getting Jaden Daniels back and actually promote a little bit more of a shootout-friendly game script. And then it's just like, how many straight weeks can Minnesota watch Justin Jefferson not get going before they really do try to finally force the issue? I think it's time. They're back home. They've had back-to-back tough matchups against the Seahawks, against the Packers that were also both on the road. So just, if it's not this week, I don't know when, Dwayne. I promise you, I will find a way to move Justin Jefferson outside my top 24 by next week if he doesn't boom here. But it's going to be a moot point, Dwayne, because it's happening. He's my wide receiver 17. He's your wide receiver 18. Come on, Dwayne. This is the week. It has to be.
Well, look, here's what I can tell you. Justin Jefferson's going to get open. Justin Jefferson's going to do his part. If JJ McCarthy, even if we can just run into a little bit of luck with JJ McCarthy, if we can just complete some of these passes, yes, the ceiling is there as usual with Justin Jefferson, if the connections can happen.
Again, it's not like JJ McCarthy is the first bad quarterback we've ever seen in the NFL. Wide receivers have still had good games before. I think we will see Jettas do his thing here again. But guys, that wraps up this week's Go Hard or Go Home, brought to you by Mike's Hard Lemonade, because playing it safe is how you end up watching the playoffs from the couch. We are on to the 1Z positions here on the Fantasy Life Show. Quarterbacks up next, led off by Mr. Josh Allen, Mr. QB1. Matthew Stafford all the way up there as the QB2. More on him shortly. Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, Patrick Mahomes, and Joe Burrow rounding out the top 6. We got Jared Goff as QB7, Lamar Jackson, QB8, Jacoby Brissett, QB9, Baker Mayfield, Toyotathon, Jordan Love, and Bo Nix rounding out our top 12. Dwayne, we have gotten a few start-sit questions involving these quarterbacks already. If we do end up seeing Jaden Daniels back in the picture, would he be someone you'd be willing to immediately get into that lower end QB1 tier?
Yeah, I would. I've already got him there. I've got Jaden Daniels sitting at QB 11 right now. My only concern is that they don't give him some of the design rushing attempts, Ian, coming back from the injury. I think he's still going to do his thing in the scramble game. So it's kind of like some of the Jackson Dart stuff that we talked about earlier this week. But we could also just be completely wrong. And Dan Campbell, he wears his hat. I mean, not Dan Campbell. When we talk about why is my mind going blanky, and former defensive coordinator for the golly, I'm going blank on it. Anyway, defensive coordinator for the Cowboys, Dan Quinn. Good grief. I had the Dan part right. But got that hat on backwards, Ian. A guy that wears their hat backwards, that's probably like 60 years old. They could do anything. They could do absolutely anything. And if they give him the design stuff, man, like, honestly, I think you could push him as high as like QB 8. I'm not going to get him past Burrow. Yeah. I'm not going to get him past Burrow. Like that's the spot. Now, Burrow, we do have some weather potential in Buffalo as well. So we'll have to monitor that. But I don't see myself getting him ahead of Burrow but I could see us getting ahead of him, getting him ahead of Mayfield. Jacoby Brissett, man, like at this point, like Jacoby Brissett's been so money. Lamar, we're probably going to be moving down the ranks based on this practice report stuff, but I can still see him being up a few more spots, but definitely a low end QB1.
So yeah, Wesley, we would go Jaden over Caleb Williams, and also Nordic Tyler. We would go Joe Burrow over Jared Goff. I think, Dwayne?
I do too. Yep, I agree.
Yeah. And then also just real quick, Kaneki was wondering Trevor Lawrence, Mariota, who's probably not going to be starting, so we're not going to go with him, or Sam Darnold. I think at that point, Dwayne, as much as T-Law actually did look better against the Titans, funny how that works, I still would just prefer to go with Sam Darnold.
Yeah, I have T-Law one spot ahead of Darnold in the ranks, so it's like it really comes down to what you prefer. Like they're right there. The big thing with T-Law is he has been scrambling more here recently. He's the guy that gives you the better chance to score the rushing touchdown. But to Ian's point, we really don't know what version of Trevor Lawrence is going to show up in the passing game. One that's going to go, they could throw 3 picks and 1 touchdown. Of course, I guess you could say that about Sam Darnold too. The Falcons we had more respect for early in the year. Like that defense has fallen apart here a little bit in the more recent weeks, no longer deducting things for facing the Falcons like we used to earlier in the year. So I think it comes down to your call. Ian has it Sam Darnold. I do have it Trevor Lawrence one spot ahead. Very close.
And then SNDT was wondering Lamar or Brissett, which I'm honestly kind of starting to wonder as well. So I would say let's see what happens on Friday. But man, if we don't get a full at this point, yeah. Probably.
I mean, like, dude, it's like, I mean, he's averaging 20.7 fantasy points as the starter. Like, honestly, we're praying Lamar gets to 20 fantasy points right now. Let's just take the guy that's doing it. After this show, I'm moving Lamar below Jacoby Brissett. I'm probably moving Lamar to like QB 12.
We are unironically taking Jacoby Brissett over Lamar Jackson and Michael Wilson over Justin Jefferson in week 14. And I don't think we're even wrong doing so, Dwayne. That's just kind of, again, a crazy spot to be in. But yes, I'm with you. Jacoby over Lamar. I will be making that change as well. Someone we have over all those guys, again, he is coming in as our QB2 in the consensus ranks. Matthew Stafford, Dwayne, your QB2, my QB3, multiple touchdowns in 6 straight games. Obviously doesn't have anything close to an actual rushing floor. But you know what? Going up against the Cardinals, assuming Devontae Adams is fine, man, who say he's not going to keep throwing for 3 or 4 touchdowns a week.
Yeah, good call on Devontae Adams, right? If we have Adams out, that really changes the projection on Stafford. So QB, and look, this is really hard to do, guys. For us to have a quarterback that doesn't have any sort of rushing upside to get inside the top 3 or 4, it's very rare for it to happen. Actually, I'll say this is the first time that it's happened all year across our rankers, even with the weeks where we've had the buys. So if you look at Stafford, QB7 this year at 19.5 fantasy points per game, he ranks first in passing touchdowns per game with 2.7 per game, guys. It's absolutely ridiculous. But the addition of Adams is the key component that's really helped that. So listen to this, Ian. The Rams have scored a touchdown on 34% of their drives. That's tied for first with the Colts for the NFL. My guess is the Rams finish in first because the Colts are headed a little bit in the opposite direction with Daniel Jones dealing with the injury. But 40% of their drives get to the red zone. They also lead in that category. They have the 3rd most plays inside the 5-yard line that are passing plays. Third most plays inside the 5, 1.8 per game. And they throw the ball 54% of the time on those plays. That's the 7th ranked mark. So everything you said, the data backs it up. They get down in close. They don't feel like they have to run it. Friedman covered this yesterday as well. Like Devontae Adams, like there may not be a better bet on any slate of a player to score a touchdown than him. Like even over running backs, which is really weird to say. And of course, that is really benefiting Matthew Stafford. And we have Sean McVay, man, the master puppet string puller. Like he's completely in his bag. They use play action all the time. They've got motion going around. They're using this 3 tight end package. Like they are really just keeping defenses completely on their heels. This is a very, very good offense. And the Rams carry the 2nd highest team total, after you talk about all those things, at 28.5 points per game. And the Cardinals have boosted opposing quarterbacks by a half touchdown per game. So we're talking about a guy leading the league in touchdown passes, and now he plays one of the defenses that actually boost touchdown passes the most, the 3rd most to be exact for the Cardinals. So 23.6 is the Xfinity best ceiling. Won't be in that range of 30 like a Josh Allen, but on this slate, man, with some of the weather and all the other things we're dealing with, yeah, Matthew Stafford, my QB2 in the top 3 consensus for our rankers.
And again, just really unprecedented how much he really is force feeding Adams at the goal line. 14 targets inside the 5-yard line this year, guys. Kyron Williams and Blake Corum have combined for 17 carries inside the 5-yard line. So their goal line back is more or less fades and slants to Devontae Adams. And you know what? It works. So why shouldn't they do that? Do I want to touch on some other quarterbacks, one of which is playing tonight on Thursday Night Football? Dak Prescott. Now, he was actually asked what he remembers from the Cowboys' last game in Detroit. Quote, that we lit them up. A lot of passing yards, about to do it again. Dak talking a little smack ahead of TNF. I love to see it. And accordingly, man, he's a top 4 quarterback of the week for us.
Yeah, look, man, the Cowboys are absolutely vibing. You got Lamb, you got Pickens, you got Ferguson. They're all healthy at this point. Dak's already the QB5 on the year at 19.9 fantasy points per game. Over the last 4, absolute heater, Ian, 22.1 points per game. That's the 3rd best mark in the NFL over that stretch. Dallas ranks 5th in the percentage of drives to reach the red zone at 35%. They lead all teams with passing plays inside the 5-yard line at 2.4 per game. And when you add that up with George Pickens in the mix, Ian, as well as Ferguson and what he's doing, CD's honestly been the guy a little bit left out down in that category, but he could get going at any time, man. Just too many weapons, good play calling going on. They're still playing balance, so the defense still has to respect the run. So it's not like teams just know that Dallas has to be in this all-out pass mode. The improvements to the defense are also helping that. You guys all know, like, the number one thing that you can do on offense is the element of surprise. The more the defense doesn't know what you're going to do, the harder it is for them to defend. And the Cowboys doing a very good job right now of keeping opposing defenses on their heels. So Prescott, man, QB3 for me this week. Xfinity best projection, 24.2. That's slightly higher than Stafford. Why? Because Dak has shown a little bit on the ground this year, and we haven't gotten that from Stafford. So if someone wanted to argue Dak QB2 over Stafford QB2 this week, I wouldn't blame them. I think you may have done that, Ian.
I think I may have, Dwayne. My only concern with this game is just how much everything does actually point in the direction of a shootout. I feel like when we see things looking this good on paper, we just get a dud out of nowhere that we can't explain because, we're trying to predict the future of a sport with a ball that is not even round. So we will see what happens. But yes, really is tough to figure out a way where Dak and company do not go off here on Thursday night. Someone just a little bit more down the ranks, Dwayne, Jacoby Brissett, both of our QB9s for now. As soon as the show is over, though, I think he will be up there as the QB8. Things that happen when you're averaging 312 passing yards per game. Yes, it is a tougher matchup against the Rams, mentioned that before, but at the same time, man, we did just see Bryce Young more or less have his way with this group, particularly downfield. Would be a lot cooler if we didn't have 2 more potential of his wide receivers out of the picture, but just everything Jacoby's done in the most pass-heavy offense since week 6, even if it is just Michael Wilson and Trey McBride, who's to say Jacoby won't clear 300 once again?
Yeah, man, the QB5 since taking over in his 6 starts, 20.7 fantasy points per game. We've got a large enough sample here. The Cardinals with Jacoby Brissett under center, the number 1 pass-heavy team, Ian, a 6% drop back rate over expected with Jacoby at the helm. So 8.5-point underdogs here against the Rams. But look, we've seen the Cardinals in these games where they're losing them and Jacoby is still putting up the numbers, even though they may lose the element of surprise. And we've seen him do it in games without Marvin Harrison, where it's just down to Michael Wilson as well as Trey McBride. Does a good job of getting his backs involved in the receiving game as well, like Bam Knight, Michael Carter doing a little bit over these last couple of games. So I think he's a lock as a top 10 option. And man, guys, as far as like these, if you look at the projections and then you look at the Vegas odds, like his passing total has been a print fest, man. And again, this week, his line by odds makers, aggregate across all sites, you'll kind of have to shop around and find the best one, set at 246. Man, I've got him projected for 263. And like you said, he's averaging 313. So we're already taking 50 yards off of what this guy's been doing, but the line is set lower than that. So I like that as a prop bet this week, the over on Jacoby Brissett's passing yards.
One more quarterback before we get to the sicko start in Hartitz heater. Jaden Daniels, Dwayne, who again got in that full practice on Thursday, presumably signaling that he has been cleared for contact. Not official, but again, it does sound like he will be starting under center here ahead of Sunday's game there against the Vikings. So what's just wild to me with Jaden Daniels is how fantasy friendly he can be, because he hasn't been a lights out quarterback this year. He was kind of struggling in that Cowboys game before he got injured. He had the bad performance against the Packers. And yet, as bad as he has maybe been in real life, relatively, not saying he's been awful, but he hasn't had a game with under 16 fantasy points yet. So hasn't scored more than 20.6. Maybe we haven't gotten that huge boom so far, but it's just wild, man, where Jaden Daniels could be playing for him not great football and still be a pretty darn great fantasy quarterback.
Yeah, there's a few things here. Number one, he's going to have all of his weapons this week. You're going to have Deebo Samuel, going to have Terry McLaurin, you're going to have Zach Ertz. And then if you just look at what he's done, to your point, he hasn't boomed, but in his 4 full healthy games, which that's sad, that's all we have to look at, still 19.6 fantasy points per game, Ian. Like that's a top 12 quarterback, like on most weeks. So when you look at him, he's more of a boom bust QB1 for me. But even after the deductions that I gave him in the design rushing attempts, just not knowing how they're going to want to handle it with him coming off this elbow injury, he still has the 3rd best Xfinity best ceiling on the slate at 24.4. So even though we slashed those numbers, we know what he can do as a rusher, and he could still get there just on what he does as a scrambler. And if they do use him in the design run game and they decide to kind of, pick where they're wanting to do that, it could be the stuff inside the 5, right? I mean, we've got a 3-headed monster here in the backfield, so it wouldn't surprise me to see Jaden Daniels get a rushing touchdown. And so that's part of why that ceiling number comes in so good. So if you guys are looking at a matchup, where you're a big underdog, that's where I like Jaden Daniels more, because I do think there's also there's a potential bust element to him here as well, because we don't know exactly how they'll handle him, but the boom upside is there.
And I think that initial point about Terry McLaurin and all these other guys actually being healthy is huge, because it's a Vikings defense that, hasn't been horrendous, I would say, recently. They actually did a pretty good job blitzing the heck out of Sam Darnold last week. But, guys, weeks 1 through 6, I mean, they were number 1 in EPA allowed per dropback. Ever since then, though, 29. So Brian Flores' defense, as what tends to kind of happen as the season goes on, starting to get figured out here just a little bit more. Dwayne, that takes us to the sicko start of the week. Obviously, have guys like Drake May on bye, so people need to try to find the streamer, and I think we're on the same page here. I don't want to say that you freaking stole my bull call, but you certainly got one of the guys on the short list. So talk about the artist formerly, maybe still known as Ty God, and what he could do this Sunday.
Yeah, still known as Ty God. Come on, 10% of Yahoo leagues. That's how much he's rostered. So he's out there 90% of the time, guys. He's only in 6% of starting lineups. He gave you 21.3 fantasy points in week 13 against the Falcons. It's only his 7th game over the last 3 years where he's played at least 90% of the snaps. But if you look at him over those games, Ian, 16.9 fantasy points per game, averaging 240 passing yards, 1.1 passing touchdowns. And here's the big one, 34 rushing yards per game in those contests. And I don't know, some people say, well, that's Tyrod 3 years ago. Look, guys, Tyrod's been old for a while. And he's doing a lot of this on scrambling stuff. They are using him some in the design run game, but he knows how to read a defense, and he knows when he's got that room to go ahead and take off. He sees the defenders turn the back to him. He's really good at doing that. Here's the other thing, man. He does have upside in the passing game. He's not one of these guys when you look at this 240, right, and it's a bunch of numbers just grouped around it. In the last 7 games that he's played, man, he's got a game of 279 passing yards, 319 passing yards, and 297 passing yards. So when you have a guy that you just add up what he's doing on the ground, he essentially gives you 4.4 fantasy points just off the bat with what he can do on the ground. If he runs into one of those passing performances and it happens to come with 2 or 3 passing touchdowns, Tyrod does have the archetype. And I know people are going to hear this and you're thinking it sounds weird, that he can finish in the top 3 quarterbacks. He has that kind of archetype to still do that. Can he do that for a whole season? No, but we're just talking about a spot start here for him. 19.4 is his Xfinity best ceiling, but if you look at the outlier case, is closer to 25 points, which talks about hitting one of those ceiling passing performances. So I really do like it. You got a dual threat guy. You got a matchup that we're not really too worried about with Miami giving up 253 yards and 1.7 passing touchdowns over the last 4 games. They've boosted opponents by 20.9 passing yards and 0.3 passing touchdowns over the last 5 weeks. They traded away Jalen Phillips. So the defense not quite looking the way it did earlier in the season. So yeah, Tyrod, man, mid-range QB2, but has that QB1 upside.
Fantasy Life consensus QB20. He is ahead of guys like Tua Tagovailoa, Tyler Shuck, JJ McCarthy, Aaron Rodgers, Shedeur Sanders, and those sort of guys that you really want nothing to do with. So I will say, guys, I'm with Dwayne on Tyrod being kind of our preferred streamer. But if we do still have a question mark about Jaden Daniels or Justin Herbert for my hard seater, I was just going to say Marcus Mariota and Trey Lance. I think they actually do have QB1 upside if we do see them get the spot start. Again, based on the news we've kind of gotten today, I think it's probably a moot point. So it is what it is trying to get off these bold takes during the middle of the week. But I would just say with both these quarterbacks, Marcus Mariota and everything he did in Mile High, or not in Mile High, but against Denver was very impressive last Sunday night. Then also with Trey Lance, guys, I know it didn't exactly work out in San Fran and everything, but we've seen him in 4 spot starts over the years. He has had 16 rush attempts, 8, 13, and 6. And again, going up against an Eagles defense that won't have Jalen Carter really shouldn't be too much of an issue for him to, again, rack up those fantasy-friendly rush attempts. So if I was someone where we're pretty confident Justin Herbert's going to play, Dwayne, I'd actually feel okay with having Trey Lance as basically my emergency go ahead and put him in the lineup option, as opposed to having to start, a Tua Tagovailoa or Shedeur Sanders of the world.
Yes.
So we'll just keep that in mind. And for any of you out there in those dynasty streets, I really do like trying to sometimes handcuff those quarterbacks because, man, super flex leagues, it really is like bringing a knife to a gunfight when you're in these unfortunate circumstances. And Mariota and Trey Lance are 2 of the rare backup quarterbacks that, again, have that fantasy-friendly dual threat upside there. But yeah, hopefully the starters just play, and this doesn't even matter. Dwayne, let's move on and close things out with a look at the tight end position. Top 12 fantasy life tight ends on the board, led off by Mr. Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, Tyler Warren, and Travis Kelce. We got Jake Ferguson as our tight end 5, Dalton Kincaid hopefully as the tight end 6. He has been limited in back-to-back practices to start the week as he tries to recover from that hamstring injury, but cannot say enough good things about that matchup against the Bengals, followed by Bretton Strange, Harold Fanning, Kyle Pitts, Jawan Johnson, Oronde Gadsden, and Darren Waller. Dwayne, we got guys like Mark Andrews and Dallas Goedert just outside the top 12, and honestly, man, after Dalton Kincaid, it's just, I don't know about you, but when I was going through my ranks, like I literally looked at tight end 7 through 14 and was thinking, if you literally flip these guys, I have my preference, but I couldn't necessarily argue with it if we had guys like Andrews and Goddard up there. So would you agree that, again, Circle of Trust really is just those top 6 guys, and after that, it does get a lot tighter?
Yeah, I think the circle of trust, like the first tier, is the first 4 guys, right? It's McBride, Bowers, Warren, and Kelce. Then I think you have a little mini tier with Ferguson and Kincaid, and then you have all the guys after that. And I do agree with you. Like, you could shuffle that order up and show it to me after the games are played, and it won't surprise me if any one of them is at the top of the list and the other guy's at the bottom of that list. And a lot of it will come down to who scores the touchdowns, which is how a guy like Waller sneaks into our top 12, right? It's really a good opportunity to score the touchdown, and you've really only got Waddle there to compete with, and Achane for targets. So yeah, a lot of different ways that it could play out this week.
Speaking of touchdowns, someone who scored their first touchdown of the season last week, Jaguars tight end 1, Bretton Strange, came off IR and has had back-to-back good games, looking very much like one of the brighter options at the position here. So, Dwayne, he's your tight end 7, my tight end 8. Very, very good matchup against the Colts defense that's allowed the 3rd most PPR points per game this season to opposing tight ends.
Yeah, I think a lot of this just comes down to Brian Thomas Jr. has not been very good this year. We talked about Jacoby Myers earlier. We'll see what happens with Parker Washington and the injury news. But there's just a chance, really, that Strange is, one of the top 2 passing options in Jacksonville for the rest of the season. You look at these last 2 games, Ian has given you 13.9 fantasy points, a 79 utilization score. It's a very small sample, guys. We're not saying Brenton Strange is like some special difference maker. At least at this point, we're not saying it. But he is a former 2nd-round pick. He's in his 3rd season. He's got an 18% target share. So, when you look at those numbers historically, that's the kind of thing that's going to give you a mid-range tight end 1 finish for a season. And we have that, and you're playing against the Colts, who give a 2.2 fantasy boost to opposing tight ends. So I do like Strange in that mid-range tight end 1 category this week.
It is wild, man. There's that picture from the Ohio State bench where it was Marvin Harrison Jr., Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Chris Olave all next to each other on the bench. I got to see the same one from Penn State when they had Tyler Warren, Brenton Strange, and Theo Johnson all sitting next to each other. No, it's not quite as, amazing as the Ohio State group. But seriously, all these guys looking very much like, the next wave of good tight ends. Hopefully, again, we see that start to pick up as soon as this week. Dwayne, that takes us to the sicko start, someone that you have ranked as your tight end 9. Just saying, I'm actually a true believer in having ranked even higher at tight end 7. Not a big deal, but talk about Harold Fanning at home against the Titans.
That's good on your part. I'm not even going to be mad about it. But yeah, Harold Fannin is available in 65% of Yahoo leagues right now. Ian is only in 17% of lineups. And we've got this little 2-game trend going where he's really emerged with a full-time role with 81% and 93% route participation rates over the last 2 games. He's had 33 and 22% target shares in those contests. Yes, guys, the Browns offense is absolutely grotesque. It's sick. It's disgusting. It may make you want to throw up, but Fannon's the guy that gets all the stuff underneath. He gets a ton of stuff that they design for him. He's now on the field more. Ian has put out a nice video showing all the tackles that the guy breaks or avoids. Like this is a superstar in the making. And I get we don't like the offense necessarily, but man, like he's their number one option. He's the number one passing game option in Cleveland now. And Jerry Jeudy, while he struggled in that role, a lot of that stuff is downfield where we get more inaccuracy on the throws or the quarterback doesn't have time to get the throw off, before they get the pressure. Harold Fannin, a lot of his targets don't have to deal with that same type of stuff. So with Fannin, Xfinity best ceiling of 14.4 points. He's got a median projection of 9.3. So I like him as a mid-range tight end one this week as well. And maybe I'll just have to move him ahead of where you've got him in the ranks.
Not, picture perfect weather in Cleveland. It's never going to be in December, guys, but it is temperatures around freezing, not next to zero. And then we actually only have winds about 10 miles per hour. So I think the point you brought up too, Dwain, about them actually designing things for Fannin. Like they've run plays where he's lined up a fullback and all of a sudden he's running a flag route and just kind of getting left, behind by the defense. We're getting those on top of those, again, short, just yak friendly completions that, we should feel more confident about Shedeur Sanders completing as opposed to the bombs down the field. So I like that call by you, but not as much as I like the hardest hitter of the week, and that is Darren Waller, once again scoring 2 touchdowns against this Jets secondary. So first of all, Darren Waller is just a tight end that I want on my roster for the rest of the way. If I'm not lucky enough to have one of those kind of top 6 or 7 options at the position, they get the Jets this week, followed by the Steelers, the Bengals, and then also the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 4 matchups that should not be scaring us. We also got to give Waller just respect for honestly making the most of his opportunities this season. One of only 3 tight ends with a passer rating when targeted north of 150. Came back last week, had a very nice 69% route rate, already playing the full-time role. And Dwain, we've been trying to do more stuff with the man and zone coverage stuff this year. Most of the time, wide receivers are the position that is benefiting more from facing a man-heavy defense, but not all the time. And we actually saw that happen with Kyle Pitts last week. Darren Waller also fits that archetype. And honestly, I think it makes sense. You look at Pitts, you look at Waller, 2 guys that, again, are more so, I would say, just kind of wide receiver as tight ends, as opposed to your traditional hand-the-dirt block type. So looking at Waller this year, he's lined up in the slot or out wide on about, I think, 79% of his snaps. He's facing a Jets defense that is bad, 27th in EPA allowed per dropback, and also has run the 4th most man coverage. Waller against man this year, guys, 29% targets per route run. Against zone, he's only 10%. So I just think it makes sense. You see Waller, he's not, kind of this Jake Ferguson type of guy who's just going to sit in the open zone. He's trying to work downfield. He's trying to win man on man, and Tua seems to already have pretty good chemistry with him. So he's my tight end 9 on the week. Dwayne's tight end 13. We're facing the Jets, Dwayne. Honestly, again, I mentioned it. It's a long tier, but the more I just talk myself into it, I can see myself moving Waller ahead of Fannin. You might not even have to move him up.
Yeah, go ahead, do that. No, look, when I was doing the rankings with Waller, like I was torn on him as well. Like, and with the rest of season projections this week when I was working on those, and with rest of season, I'm factoring in the fact that, we've just seen Waller, he's older, like there's some of the injury concerns. So I was fine leaving him a little bit lower in those, but I am concerned, like I could have him a little bit low in the weekly rankings. Bottom line is, guys, I see him as a low end tight end 1, but he does offer that mid-range tight end 1. Hell, Darren Waller offers high end tight end 1 upside because of what Ian said. He really, I know it's a bold call saying the 2 touchdown catches, but he is the archetype that can do that. And the one other thing I'll say about the man coverage stuff, there are other guys we've seen with a high man targets per route run this year. Trey McBride, more of a receiver type tight end. Tucker Kraft, before the injury happened, he was also there. And Brock Bowers does well against man coverage as well. So you're right. The guys that are tight ends that really are more like wide receivers, they don't fall into that K. Otten, Jake Ferguson kind of category where it's just like, oh, everyone's covered downfield due to zone coverage. We're going to dump it down underneath. These are guys that can work further down the field. And they are just guys that, honestly, their quarterbacks trust when they see when they see this single coverage look and they just throw it in there to them.
And with that, guys, going to wrap up another edition of the Fantasy Life Show. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us. It is week 14 after all, but rest assured we're keeping that foot on the gas to help get you guys all the way through that week 17 championship. So make sure you guys continue to check out all of our content at fantasylife.com and our very much free Xfinity Start Sit tool, which again gives you the opportunity to go ahead and try to ask some of these start sit questions, whether it's a toss up, whether you're favored to win, or maybe an underdog. Very, very cool stuff from Dwain and our entire crew over at Fantasy Life. So for Dwain, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Life Show. And until next time, take care, everybody.